Okay, welcome everybody. We're just past the hour. So I have the privilege of welcoming everybody to this session today. I'm really excited to be here. Feel free if you want to introduce yourself on the chat. You can tell us where you're joining from. My name's Rebecca Gokert, and I'm a professor at the University of Alberta in the School of Public Health. And I'm also the director of the Evaluation Capacity Network, which has been supporting our webinar series. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to this session today and thank you for taking time to join us and learn about the co-creation of evaluation plans with our guest, Gladys Rowe. So guided by an Anishinaabe framework that serves to highlight Anishinaabe values, cultures, and aspirations, today we will learn the critical steps needed to co-create an evaluation plan, the importance of co-creation, iterative development, and alignment within Indigenous practices. I'm going to pass it over shortly, but before I do that, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. So for today's session, we have made sure that our technology hopefully will run smoothly. So we've disabled microphones and cameras. You do have access to the chat, so please use it. We have a support team in the background, so hang tight if anything unexpected happens, and we'll try to resolve it as quickly as possible. And again, if you have questions during the presentation by Gladys, we encourage you to pop those in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to them throughout the session today or at the end. And if you need any support, also reach out. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to some lovely students that have been putting on this webinar series, and I'll hand it to you, Aaliyah, to welcome us to our session.
Thank you. So our team would like to start today's session by recognizing firstly how much of a blessing it is to be able to actually remotely learn with all of you here today. Every time we have these webinars, changemakers like yourself dial in from all corners of Turtle Island, including us. Half of us are in Treaty 9 territory and the other half are in Treaty 6. We're grateful to be able to host this session together, though virtually, so that we may continue to learn about decolonial evaluation, or as Gladys has once said herself, we can begin to think inside the circle when it comes to transforming the futures we are living into. Thank you.
And with that being said, it's my honor to welcome Gladys Rowe. So Gladys is a Swampy Cree evaluation consultant and creator of the evaluation podcast Indigenous Insights, who also holds relations with Ireland, England, Norway, and Ukraine. She's a member of the Fox Lake Cree Nation in northern Manitoba, but currently resides on the occupied lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish peoples in Washington state. Gladys is a scholar, filmmaker, poet, author, facilitator, researcher, and evaluator. Today, she'll be presenting what she showcased at last year's American Evaluation Association conference. That being said, I'd like to welcome Gladys.
Thank you, Danse. Thank you so much for welcoming me and inviting me into this space today. I'm so grateful to be able to share some of the work that I have been walking alongside in partnership with Maywija, which is located in Bemidji, Minnesota. So before I jump in, I would love to welcome you into this space by offering you an invitation to become as fully present as you can in this time together, where I'll be sharing story and experiences. And so I'd like to invite you for a moment to take a deep breath in and out, and to feel yourself in wherever space you are showing up in a good way, because we know that being able to share and to listen deeply, and how we prepare ourselves to do that work of listening really matters. And so I'm so grateful that you have made the time to be here, and to think about the work of evaluation with me through these stories. So thank you so much for the wonderful introduction as well for the team at the Evaluation Capacity Network. I do want to say that I used to live in Edmonton a long time ago. I grew up, I went to junior high and high school there. And so the University of Alberta and Edmonton holds a beautiful place in my heart. And I go back there often to visit family. family. So I do currently live on the lands of the Squamish and Duwamish nations, and I've been walking with Mewija, supporting the development of their evaluation, specifically their Anishinaabe-led evaluation framework since early 2023. So it's been 2 years now. And as was shared in the introduction, this presentation was originally made as a result of the invitation to be on the Presidential Strand panel at the AEA conference. Next slide, please. So these are the three amazing leaders, Anishinaabe Kwe from Mewija, Natalie, Pearl, and Roxanne, who attended AEA with me in Portland and who granted me permission to share our story in this space today. And really grateful for the powerful experiences, wisdom, gifts, and work that they bring to their community and that they're willing to share in this space today through this offering. Next slide. So to give you a little bit of context, this beautiful photograph is from the territories where Mewija works. They're located in Bemidji, which is northern Minnesota. And so Mewija is an organization that aims to provide Anishinaabe-led maternal child health and family wellness services to community members in northern Minnesota, really with the aim of supporting them to achieve and maintain Minobimidisowin, which in Anishinaabe means to live well, to have good health, and to lead a good life. As Anishinaabe people, the team at Mewija acknowledges that they really walk in two societies. And as a Swampy Cree person who is joining their team, I really want to acknowledge this reality as well. So in our work, some of the common foundation setting that we did as we started to think about what evaluation looks like, feels like, and the intent and priorities around it was to understand and acknowledge that our values, our beliefs, and our practices really differ from the Euro-Western systems that we have been educated within, that we live within, and that research and evaluation in Euro-Western contexts often drives evidence-based practice. I talk about, evaluation and research as knowledge production activities. They produce the information that helps decision makers to influence policies, make funding decisions, enact laws, and build relationships. And so what we do know about that knowledge production work is that research knowledge can take up to 17 years before it's actually applied in practice. And so that was one of the fundamental pieces that we talked about as we started our evaluation work together, because this gap in translation between what is considered evidence and how it translates into Indigenous communities really impacts health and wellness, and it impacts, in particular, the case of Mewija, maternal child health and wellness. So in the field of evaluation, when we think about work that's grounded upon an Indigenous paradigm, we understand that we need to prioritize that our purpose as Indigenous peoples, in Mewija's case as Anishinaabe peoples, our purpose, our goals, and our engagement with communities that we walk alongside. So my work in Indigenous evaluation really seeks to shift the expectation that evaluation is something that is done to Indigenous peoples, programs, and organizations, and move it to a process that's driven by Indigenous peoples, programs, and organizations. And so the evaluation approach that I'll share today, which is an Anishinaabe evaluation approach, from Mewija, seeks to shift that paradigm and really center relational accountability as a foundation of evaluation. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share a little bit of an introduction, and this is a video that we shared at the AEA conference as well. And this introduces Millicent Simison, who is one of the co-founders of Mewija, who talks about the name Mewija and really starts to give you an intro into the ways of knowing, being, and doing that guide everything that they do within that clinic. So let's play that short video, please.
My name is Millicent Simonson. My spirit name is Makwaikwe. I'm of the Bear Clan. I live in Bemidji, Minnesota. Mewaja Undadasike Wigamig means, Mewaja means long, long ago, and we're considering it back, going back to beginning of time. Undadasike is a word for a woman who works with women who are birthing or a woman who is birthing. And Wigamig stands for a structure. So that could be your house, a hospital, it could be a bus, it could be a structure out in the woods, could be a birthing lodge. And how it came to be is that another coworker and I realized we had some services that were missing within our community regarding around maternal child health. And we thought, how could we serve our women better and families? We saw some things that were missing within maternal child health in working with women of 0 to 3, who had children of 0 to 3. We saw that when they went into the facility to have their babies, they didn't have any support, family included. And we talked about how we could bring more assistance to the families. And at that time, where we were working at was offering a doula training. And so we decided to see if we could get into the training, and we found out we had missed it. So then that was when we decided for the next 3 years, after we made that commitment, we were going to get all the training that we could to become birth, postpartum, lactation, and then it went right into becoming certified nurse midwives. And right now, so at this current moment, I'm a traditional midwife for the organization. I'm also the president, and then I also work within community regarding community activities. We also do community outreach, education, and then also we have a traditional clinic that we work with our medicines, and so I also assist with that.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So for Mewaja, their Anishinaabe-led evaluation approach actually begins from a foundation that is rooted, like I said, within everything that they do. And so their worldview, values, language, protocols, practices, and relationships with the world inform how they show up in community to do their work. And thinking about evaluation as a process that walks alongside that, it's not simply a technical process, but is actually a very living practice that's aligned with their community rhythms and responsibilities. And so it's ongoing and it's adaptive and shaped by the people, the relatives that Mewaja walks with. So when Natalie and the team at Mewaja were considering whether to expand their clinic offerings at Mewaja to include prenatal and postpartum care, they first began by offering a SEMA, by offering tobacco, and visiting with community to ask the question about whether this was needed and what it could look like. So they visited with pregnant people and families, and they visited with knowledge keepers to listen to the priorities and to learn about what would be welcomed within that community space. These listening sessions offered direction for Mewaja on the structure of the programming, on the processes that they would use to invite people in and to engage in that group prenatal and postpartum care. And also it provided direction for the kinds of content that they would include in terms of Anishinaabe teachings around, what it means to be pregnant and give birth, what it means to care for relatives as a community, and the different teachings that are particular for those stages in life. And so that really informed, that community engagement really informed the expansion of the clinic and Meiwaja's work into prenatal and postpartum care. Next slide, please. So all of that took place before I became a part of their work. And so when I was invited to become a part of Meiwaja's evaluation experience, Natalie spoke about this at the conference, but what she said was she knew that she needed to do evaluation differently. And everything that she learned about evaluation in her own master's and doctoral work in nursing was from that Euro-Western foundation as well. And so she sought recommendations and referrals throughout her network of Indigenous scholars to see, is there people who are doing this work of Indigenous evaluation out there, and how might we prioritize Anishinaabe practices within our evaluation? And so she reached out to me to see if our visions and our approaches would align with practices that were already really embedded within how Meiwaja did their work. And so their evaluation approach really mirrors how their team developed its bundle of care. And so you see the graphic here. It's a really beautiful illustration that we work together on to articulate what it is that Meiwaja does, and importantly, how they show up for relatives. The how of their work is really important. And so embedding Anishinaabe ways of knowing and doing really become a central part of the space that they create with relatives. And then alongside that, the evaluation is structured to pay attention to physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental care and processes. We incorporate and prioritize storytelling methodologies, and we really pay attention to seasonal cycles and what those teachings offer us in terms of what we should be doing around evaluation and learning. So, yes, I lost track, but let's move on to the next slide. I think that's where we need to be now. So this next video with Millicent shares a little bit about her experience with evaluation, because before you press play, I wanted to say, you know, Indigenous peoples, when we talk about evaluation being done to us, there's a history there. There's a history of bad experiences. There's a history of inequitable power dynamics. There are there's work of healing that needs to be done. And so when we learn about how evaluation might happen in a different way, when we center, in this case, Anishinaabe ways of knowing, being, and doing, we also need to unpack and heal the previous experiences that we've had in evaluation. So Millicent talks about this a little bit in the video. You can play it now, please.
For the evaluator component, I've had one previous experience working with evaluators with the grant that I was working on. And at that time, when we were meeting with them, she said, well, you write the report how you feel will benefit the work you do, but then we'll make it even better. And when she said that to me, I didn't appreciate that, because in our report, it really showed what was missing in what was being provided to the people that we were working for. And I had taken it upon myself to go out to visit with each individual village where I was working at to get their input about what they wanted to see with the grant that I was working with. So I was offended by that. And now here we are currently working with Indigenous woman evaluator, and it's been a really good experience. I'm really happy that I could see another side of what evaluators actually do, what they bring to the organization. The cultural piece for Meiwaja is the founding. That is who we are. Everything we've done since we incorporated or became 501c3 has been around culture. We got our name through a ceremony. We passed our asema to an elder. We got our colors. we had to be really precise in what we were asking of her, and that was one of the things she had said. I need to know exactly where you are, what you plan to do with the organization now and into the future. And so here we are today. Things have really evolved in the past 2 to 3 years. We've got a bigger staff. We have a wonderful, beautiful space to work out of. We have our medical provider, which was something that we had talked about a few years back. And so it's all been good. And we still continue to use our ASEMA. We won't, that is something we have to continue to do. And we have protocols that we have to follow. There's many natural laws that will govern how this organization moves into the future. I would say that you really should sit back and listen to who you're going to be working with, and not to put your ideas and thoughts in there. And if they say, like I did, you don't have that right to change those words. I'm not giving you permission to change anything. Those were things that I've said many times since I started the organization with Roberta. You just need to trust that the people that you're working with are alongside, that they know what they're doing. Because I feel I know, and I've learned that through the mothers that I work with, they've been my best teachers ever. I could not have served the people any better, because they're the ones who said, you know, that these are some of the things that we want to have done. We want to see this done in our community. And so I've had to go in front of the state and talk to different people about what I felt could be brought to the community. And now I have to go back to the community members and say, I'm not guaranteeing you that what you shared with me will be something that we can provide, but I will go back and say, this is what the funding, this is the type of funding that we're going to be receiving, and this is what we're going to be doing with it.
Next slide, please. Great. So really where we started the evaluation plan development and the co-creation process, you know, was rooted in all of the things that I've just talked about. And I first came to visit Maywaja in person for a week in March 2023. And by that time, we had been doing some work together online for a few months to talk about, you know, what do we hope this evaluation can look like, feel like, sound like, and really to make sure that it's meeting the priorities and the needs of Maywaja. One of the beautiful opportunities of starting with Maywaja so early in the process was that they really wanted to prioritize learning, and they really wanted to prioritize that iterative responsiveness that having someone walk with them in the evaluation role could provide as they were thinking through the development of the programming, of their tools, of their processes. And so that iterativeness is a structure that we have continued to prioritize over the 2 years. So back in March 2023, we spent 3 days in person co-creating the evaluation plan. And that time together, when we spend time together, there's several goals that we pay attention to. And so in that first time, it was about making introductions in person. And so relationship and time to build relationship is really important because for many different reasons. But one of the reasons that I wanted to draw forward and make visible is that I'm a Swampy Cree evaluator. So under the umbrella of Indigenous evaluation, I'm a Swampy Cree evaluator. That doesn't mean that I can necessarily pick up everything that I know and experience and take that and carry that into an Anishinaabe community and think that everything is going to translate. And so we needed to take that time to have an understanding of what it meant to work together intertribally, within our ways of knowing, being, and doing, and where the insights that I've gathered in my time as an evaluator, as a Swampy Cree evaluator, and how that might support them to think through what was important to them and how that might be grounded in their ways of knowing, being, and doing. And so that level setting was a really important process that took time to do. In March as well of 2023, I got to spend time getting to know the staff, the clinic, their operations, the history of their work together, to learn more about the context of their work and to meet their community partners. And then we got down to the business of doing the co-creation of the evaluation design and starting to draft the evaluation plan and tools. And so this reflective space that we spent together, we actually started in ceremony, and that's how we start every single time when I visit. So I go for seasonal evaluation check-ins, and we start every time in ceremony. We spend time on the land, we spend time learning about medicines, we share food, we visit, and that is the overall feeling of every single time that we make space and time to focus on the evaluation. And so they prioritize this every time I go there. They prioritize spending 3 or 4 days, full days together to think about this work that we're doing of evaluation. So on that first 3-day visit, I incorporate a lot of arts-based approaches into my work. And so we did a bit of poetic reflection. In that time together, at the end of our 3 days, I asked them to imagine, imagine yourself 1 year into the future. What would you want to tell yourself today? And so we created poems, and the process that we use for that is that using that prompt, we had some brainstorming that we did, and the team created individual poems that answered that question for themselves. We shared those poems with each other, and then they wove pieces of their poems into a collective Mewija team poem that helped them to stay connected with their initial vision of why their work is important to them and what they're working towards. And so we'll go to the next slide and you can see the poem from the first year. So this is a spring 2023 poem. I'll let you read it. Next slide, please. So one of the really important aspects of this evaluation work for Mewija and in many of the projects that I support is that the relatives who are recipients of the offerings or the services within the bundle of care are also actively engaged in the evaluation itself. So Mewija views evaluation as a continuous way for them to be able to grow as an organization and to improve their services and their organizational commitment to lifelong learning. So they've really valued the importance of evaluation techniques and really intentionally think about creating tools that are useful for themselves to be able to be respectful of what is being asked of relatives, that what they ask of relatives is going to be used in a meaningful way, and that they're able to share that learning back with relatives in an ongoing process. So evaluation within Mewija is a way for them to monitor, to reflect on their work, to reflect on the impact that they're having, and to learn how they can grow and expand. And so in alignment with these intentions, they developed an approach that began by offering a sema, by offering tobacco, so that we could come to this work with a clear mind and purpose, knowing that ceremony was an important part to guide our evaluation at all stages. Emerging from the Anishinaabe-led approach, there are really processes and methods that are collective, participatory, meaningful, and grounded in their context. And so that really means prioritizing the experiences of the relatives who access services at Mewija. The things that we prioritize in our work together is making sure that the relatives know who I am as an evaluator, why I have this role, why I'm showing up with Mewija, why they are being asked to provide feedback, being asked to fill out surveys that Mewija has developed, being asked to sit in conversation with me, and all of those processes, making sure that the relatives know that they're voluntary, and that in no way is that ever going to impact their access to services, whether they participate in that evaluation or not. And along the way, the relatives have been very engaged in sharing their experiences, knowing that what they're sharing is going to be an offering for future relatives who are participating in the groups. And so that ongoing cycle of contribution and reciprocity is a really important process within the evaluation at Mewija. So the different ways that Mewija has developed to prioritize that learning is included here. So we make time to visit. Mewija and I visit online monthly, and then we have our in-person sessions. We've developed a staff reflection and a relative reflection tool that offers insights into the delivery of these initial groups, because they were the very first times that they've offered these groups. They really wanted that intentional learning cycle through reflections. There's pre and post surveys that look at what has changed as a result of Mewuja's programming for the relatives. We use a lot of arts-based methods. So not only in our sense making, which is the seasonal times that I come together with the Mewija team to look at the evaluation, but we use arts-based methods in the time that we spend with relatives as well. So we also have conversation circles, we do offering and event tracking. I have some one-on-one visiting, and we do seasonal evaluation gatherings. And so these tools and the combination of these tools have been intentionally developed to ensure that what Mewija is gathering through their evaluation is meaningful, that it'll be used, and that it has minimal burden on relatives. We're not gathering information that isn't going to serve a particular purpose. Next slide, please. So recently, I guess maybe 9 months or so ago, the team co-developed our evaluation journey graphic. And this evaluation journey starts at the top left, and it helps Mewija to tell and to share stories about what is being learned as a result of their work with relatives, and to really guide how we tell the story, how we tell their evaluation story. So for this one and the previous one, I just wanted to acknowledge that we partnered with Sam Brad from Drawing Change, who spent a lot of time working with us back and forth to really be able to articulate the work of Mewija in a way that that centers what's important to them. And so up in the top left, we begin with celebrations, and this highlights important milestones from our work together during the year. Then we move down to building our bundles, and this section acknowledges and makes visible the bundles that each staff person carries in their work, and the work that they're doing to strengthen their bundles to support relatives. This really highlights the work that team members do throughout the year in ceremonies, in connection to ancestral and Anishinaabe teachings, in different training and professional development, and how they prioritize evaluation and learning. The next section talks about how they walk with their relatives, and it outlines Mewuja's model of care and how that's applied practically through different stories that are shared in their evaluation. And walking with our communities identifies how Mewija has offered opportunities for community members to connect, to build relationships, and to access Anishinaabe-led practices, ceremonies, and celebrations. So in addition to their prenatal and postpartum care, they offer traditional medicine clinics, healing, healing touch. They offer and lead community giveaways and round dances. And so how they work with community really matters to them. The next section is walking with our funders or partners and highlights how Mewija has been supported to provide services through its model of care and engage in reciprocal relationships with other community organizations. And then the final section up in the top right are insights that we carry. So this really makes visible and acknowledges the teachings that we've gathered from the past year's journey together in our evaluation and what we want to carry forward as a result. Next slide, please. So I really wanted to highlight and draw five from the story of the work with Mewija, draw 5 key insights forward in the co-creation of evaluation plans and this work together, that relational accountability is the foundation. This means that evaluation isn't an extractive process, but it ensures that benefit flows back to community, and that community accountability is the beacon that we're working towards to give us a direction for the purpose and the scope and the focus of our evaluation. And so, for example, with Mewija, the guidance of knowledge keepers, I shared at the beginning that the knowledge keepers really guided the community engagements and provided direction. Each year we check back in with these groups that have been a part of the process of Mewija and share. Last year we shared the first year evaluation report, the learning, and we received feedback from them and spent time closing that circle. And so that iterativeness is really important for relational accountability. The next piece that I'd like to really highlight is that embedding local cultural ways of knowing, being, and doing is fundamental in how Mewija wants to prioritize evaluation. And so those practices are really embedded in every choice that we make. It's a part of the decision-making processes. It's a part of the responsibilities that they have for this work. And so elders and knowledge keepers and community members, relatives who are actively shaping evaluation processes and guiding us through ceremony. The next point that I would want to make is about decolonizing metrics and indicators of success. I mentioned a couple of slides back that Mewija includes pre and post surveys. And so part of the development of those surveys was ensuring that we understood what success meant to Mewija. And so success to Mewija is measured through their community-defined metrics about what it means to be cared for in a good way as a relative. And then indicators have been co-created that reflects what matters to Mewija. And so thinking about connectedness to culture and community, emotional well-being, intergenerational healing, feeling loved, feeling cared for, experiencing wellness, those are all ways that we understand the potential impact that Mewija is having with relatives they work with. The fourth piece that I wanted to add there is that arts-based and storytelling methods, and I touched on a couple of them just super briefly, really create a space for reflection and sense-making, create a space that allows us to engage in holistic, embodied ways of knowing, being, and doing, and to prioritize a holistic approach to evaluation. So we incorporate those in every step of our process. And then the final point that I want to make is that evaluation is a living, adaptive, and emergent process. So the framework that Mewija has outlined allows for flexibility, allows for evaluation methods to evolve based on their ongoing insights about where they're at and where their journey is going. And so that means, for example, that the staff reflections and the relative reflections that I talked about now 2 years in, because they have served their purpose, we've revised and actually we've removed the relative reflections because that initial purpose was met. And so we've thought about, okay, now what else might be an area that we need to focus on? So it's really a collective learning journey that allows for continuous adaptation. Next slide, please. So the evaluation journey at Mewaja reflects a larger movement towards sovereign Indigenous-led approaches to assessment and to evaluation and learning. And we really work to center relational accountability, Anishinaabe knowledge systems, and holistic approaches to storytelling. And we hope that in telling the story of this work, that there's an inspiration or a spark or questions or curiosities that emerge to think about how this might be prioritized within the spaces that you hold. Next slide. Miigwech. I go say thank you for listening to this journey. So I'm open for questions now. I know there's some time left as well.
You. I do have a question here from somebody anonymous, so I'll just read it out loud. They said, I really appreciate the intentional and relational approach you shared, rooted in ceremony, prioritizing relationships, and taking the time to build it, transparency, centering experiences. I'm curious about how you supported the engagement in creating an evaluation framework and developing tools, especially for those who don't have a background in research or evaluation. For example, did you hold trainings or sessions to demystify jargon like indicators, propose different data collection methods, etc.?
Yeah, that's spot on. That's exactly what happened. So really, you know, when we think about indicators, what I ask is, what are we looking for to understand that change has happened? Like what will be different as a result of this program, or what will, you know, if we look back a year from now, what are we, what are the things that we can say happen that have produced success for our work? And so really building capacity around understanding what evaluation actually is, and to absolutely demystify that jargon. And so one of the key pieces, the fundamental pieces that I do in my work, is wanting to make sure I leave behind capacity to think about themselves as capable in understanding evaluation, and to feel inspired that they can contribute and participate and lead as a result of the time spent in partnership with me. So that is absolutely correct. Thanks for that question.
Thank you. We have two more questions here. Another anonymous one is wondering if you can talk more about the collective poetry exercise that you held.
Yeah, super excited to share that, and also I'm building more resources around this. So I will, I often bring poetry into the spaces that I work within. I did a keynote 2 years ago at AEA where I asked all audience members to create a poem alongside the journey of my presentation. So poetry is a passion of mine, absolutely. So in a really quick nutshell, what I usually start out with is a series of prompts or reflection questions that people journal on a piece of paper to get their thoughts out on a paper. Because often people are like, poetry, I'm not a poet, I have no idea how to do this. And so I go through a process that engages something called found poetry. And in found poetry, you can either start with something that has a whole bunch of written content, or you can create your own content. So I do some brainstorming. I create some questions around whatever focus that we're looking at. And then once people have brainstormed, then I have a question that I say, okay, now this is the question that I'd like you to think about as you create a poem for yourself. Using that question, go onto the page of content that you have generated, circle, underline, think about what your answer might be, and then use that content to generate a poem that answers this question. So in a really quick nutshell, that's the collective poetry process. And one of the pieces that I wanted to add there is that art and creation is a really, for me, a way to gather together all of the ways that we would like to share about an experience and to help us to then articulate that. And so poetry is one of the ways that people can gather together their experiences and thoughts and feelings and then be able to share. We often then have a conversation circle or a one-on-one visit that talks about that shares story as a result. And so it's a process that is in tandem with one another.
All right, they are just coming in, these questions. Our next one is, what would co-development look like when working with multiple Indigenous organizations rather than individual organizations or communities?
Yeah, one of the fundamental things that I think that I start every project is getting on the same page around what is it that we mean when we say we're going to do this work together. And so, what is co-creation? What does it mean to co-develop something? And understanding what are the stages of that? What are the processes that we can use? What does it mean to work together? What is the decision-making process? And so really coming to an understanding about that foundation first, about what the relationship will look like in the co-development, doing some relationship building around shared vision. So yeah, without getting into a ton of detail of how to do that, doing that level setting is really important at the beginning to know who are we, what are our priorities, and how are we going to agree to work together on this work.
Great. All right, another anonymous says, thank you so much for the knowledge you shared. As a non-Indigenous person, I want to use my privilege to work with Indigenous communities and amplify their voices. Do you think it's appropriate to work with Indigenous communities or organizations as a non-Indigenous evaluator? I recognize that the work is always better done by an Indigenous person.
That's a really big question, like all of them have been. And so I'm going to attempt to answer that in the best way in my little 30-second soundbite. And so I would say it depends. It depends on a lot of things. Is there another Indigenous person who is available to do this work that you might be able to connect that organization with? Often Indigenous evaluators and researchers are, it's hard to find a person who has time or availability. And so that's like another area of capacity of space and capacity building and education that needs to happen, and mentorship in order for more of us to be able to be doing this work. And so thinking about, how might, if you've been invited into that organization and there is not an Indigenous person who's able to either lead that or co-lead that with you, how might one of the pieces that are built into that work address that gap? And to either organizationally or through student connections or thought leadership with other Indigenous scholars, how might those kinds of processes be built into it? Ideally, that would be great. Recognizing that there's lots of complexities there, but there's a really important work that needs to be done. And also, there's a lot of complexities in it as well. I'm sorry, that's not like an easy answer for your question. It's a really important question, though.
Thank you, Gladys. Another participant said, my experience with arts-based methods is that they can go deep, they can do deep reflection, but also surprise participants with how deeply they end up exploring their perspectives. And this can sometimes feel emotional or vulnerable. Can you please speak to this if you've encountered the same and how we can care for our kin in those spaces? We do use cultural practices, but I'm curious about how others navigate this.
Yes. And so all along the way, I try to really think about intentionally setting up the space so that people feel like they can share at a level that they want to share at. And so every step of the process, recognizing that please share what you feel comfortable with sharing, inviting people to share their poem. They don't necessarily have to share their poem, inviting people to think about the space that they're in when they create something and what they feel comfortable keeping for themselves and what they feel comfortable speaking into the space. We also incorporate cultural supports, and so access to the knowledge keepers and medicines and follow-up, depending on the kinds of topics that are covered in the arts-based sessions. And so really like consent and along the way, and attention and intention, about the kinds of questions that are being asked, how they're being asked, what people are being asked to share, what will be gathered up and shared publicly, if anything, after that. And so allowing people to opt out of any of those pieces as they feel appropriate for themselves.
Great. All right, another one. Do you have any advice for evaluation of projects where funders may have very specific requirements that don't align with the evaluation approach project participants and community members need?
Back when I started learning what it meant to be an evaluator, I learned about how to be an evaluator and two parallel tracks. One was through my master's program at university, and which was one course on evaluation, and the other was through working in community and community leaders and knowledge keepers telling me actually what was most meaningful for them. And in that process, I became very attuned to the fact that sometimes funders fund things in a way that isn't supportive of the way that the organizations are actually doing the work. And so organizations write the grant in the way that they need to get the grant, and then they do the work that in the way that they need to do the work, and then they report on what the funder actually wants to see, but doesn't actually get at the heart of what is making a difference for the people that they are serving. And so the Indigenous Evaluation Bundle report, which was published in 2018, was a result of that really big disconnect recognized by leaders in Winnipeg's North End, which is where I did a lot of work when I lived in Winnipeg, and recognition that there needs to be education of funders around like processes and mechanisms of change and success and transformation around what actually works in community. And so, you know, at the beginning, I shared that evaluation is a knowledge production activity, in that what we share in evaluation can then inform decision makers, policies, funders about ways of working that are actually in alignment and creating change in community. And so, thinking about your question around what do you do, is that that's what organizations have done, is that, you know, they've gathered the funding, they've done the work in the way that is meaningful, and then they've reported on what's important to the funder. And unfortunately, that's such a sad dynamic to be in. And so thinking about what are the ways that organizations might be able to, if they have the time and resources, build relationship with a funder that is able to have those critical conversations around what is meaningful for them. But that's a bit of a risk too, right? It's a risk to the organization if that funding is a little bit tenuous, or, you know, if they feel like they can't have those conversations because there's extreme power dynamics between funders and organizations. And so it takes a particular space for those conversations to happen. And sometimes organizations just aren't in the right, in the area to be able to do that work. And they shouldn't have to do that work. But sometimes they're put in the place of having to do that. I don't have a simple answer for you, but those are some of the things that I can share that I've been seen and thought about.
Excellent. All right. Adrienne LeVay said, I really appreciated first how you facilitated us to get grounded and present before we began. I see such value in data collection strategies that enable an embodiment. As someone entrenched in the European paradigm of research, I'm curious if you have any advice for incorporating grounding and embodiment work in research generally. Have you seen this done well and received well in non-Indigenous contexts?
Yes, I absolutely have. So many people are excited about thinking about ways to connect more, move from really mental focused work into more holistic work. And so there are so many organizations and leaders and non-Indigenous spaces that are excited to think about embodiment, to think about arts-based practices, to think about telling story and listening to story in ways that honor that we are complex and holistic human beings. And, when I think about that kind of work, I think about decolonial work in evaluation and how that creates the space for centering those kinds of conversations. So, yeah, there's a lot of excitement out there right now for that. And it makes me so happy.
Last question. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to all of them because of time. In the work you do, what are some strategies you find useful in negotiating with funders who favor or require Western-centric approaches?
So there is an education component there that I happily take on as an evaluator with funders who are interested in doing work in a different way, but aren't exactly sure what that could look like. And so, providing examples, doing some workshops or training are all approaches that I've offered in that space previously. When we think about readiness for decolonial or Indigenous grounded approaches, I would say I'm in the space where I mostly am approached by organizations or funders who are ready to do this work. I don't necessarily go out looking for funders who are not interested. And so I don't have a lot of feedback potentially in this area, because people who reach out to me because they're ready to um, work through what this might mean. And so there's already an openness there for having conversations, for doing the unlearning, and for thinking about how to build capacity in these ways. So I'm sorry I don't have the greatest answer there for you. Thanks. Yes, please feel free to scan those codes. That'll take you to Miwaja's and my website. I am in a website transition in the next couple of days, so it might be down for a week, but it'll be back up, I promise, and it'll be brand new and beautiful. So please feel free to connect. I'm happy to continue these kinds of conversations. They're really important to me.
And there you go. Thank you everyone for attending today. As you can see here, we have our stylized guide here, which has resources from past facilitators for this series. And I want to give a great thank you to Gladys for giving us some of her time today. Thank you.
We see a hand raised. We're not sure exactly how to manage that for the individual. Maybe it's a holdover, but if you did have a question, please just pop it in the Q&A and we can try to follow up on some of the questions. But again, we want to thank everybody for joining. Gladys, wonderful conversation. The questions were really engaging, and it's given me a lot to think about. And I invited all my students to attend, so I saw lots of familiar names. So I think that we'll be having a discussion next week in class about some of the conversation, and they'll be joined by Michelle, who will be getting them to do some poetry, which I'm excited about. So. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and we plan to post the recording once we've had a look at it. And thank you again, and we encourage you to come to our next session, where we'll be joined by Andrea Johnston, and she'll be talking about, I believe, logic models and theories of change. Really fun stuff in evaluation. So thank you very much. And Gladys, we wish you a wonderful rest of your week, and everybody else.
Thank you.
Take care.